I was sent, and I were sent an email from Portugal, from Lynn, Lin, and I think she's watching. Would you read the question for just the first part?
What is personal contact? Was the
personal contact, and I wasn't sure exactly what she meant by that, but there's some subheadings or some other questions.
In the light of relative truth and the dependently risen. That's the first question. And then related to compassion and being genuine. And if we are not separate, one with all things.
Well, it's getting pretty elaborate, and I can't really comment on that so much. But my way of responding to it would be that you really shouldn't do anything unless you have to. You shouldn't gamble and try to make yourself do something based on situation that's called the three poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance, and also hope and fear. When we're operating out of that, we tend to create a person who has an identity of being compassionate. So we're not saying you shouldn't be nice or be kind. Not saying that you shouldn't extend yourself to help others based on what's going on in front of you. But quite often, if you have to do any kind of thinking or strategizing about it, it starts to get a little bit suspicious, because then we're kind of concerned about how we're going to look. Are we going to look compassionate? Will the person realize that we're just trying to help them when we're treating them in a way that maybe they wouldn't particularly like? So that whole area can get very, as I said in a talk a few weeks ago or something, very complicated. That kind of material is very complicated. That's why it is very valuable for you as a student of the Buddha's teaching, as a student of meditation, as a student of awareness, as a student of the truth, of trying to find out what is fundamentally true. You can use this vehicle, Buddha Dharma, in all of its various forms and vehicles and styles. You can use that structure, which I think is probably a good idea. Somebody's thought about a lot of these different aspects of this way ahead of time, worked out issues and problems so that you can just work on, just like all the forms we follow here. These forms are necessary. They're not extra. And so so working with something like what is contact in the context of personal contact, there's so many different levels of contact. The one that Lynn is bringing up, dependent origination, and if we look at the 12 links in the chain of existence, which I don't want to do too much with that because it's pretty complicated, but it's basically broken down. If you study it, these 12 links, it tells you the way in which the human being coming into life and passing out of life, how that basically functions in a very simple cause and effect kind of manner. And one of the links, the sixth one, is sparsha. I think it's sparsha, contact. And the idea there is two things coming together, and the one just before that is, I think, is shadayatana, or the five skandhas, and it's the idea that things come together in terms of the consciousness. The sense organ could be the eye, the ear, the nose, tongue, body, mind, and the object, the thought, the smell, the taste, the texture, and so on. So when two things come together, any one of those come together, we have what is called contact, and that evokes a feeling, sensation. And that could be a difficult sensation, could be very pleasant. The interesting thing about sensation or the result of contact, or two things coming together, and by the way, the symbol for contact or sparsha in the 12 links, a traditional symbol is two people embracing, a man and woman embracing, I believe. And the one for the feeling that arises is an arrow in the eye, which it's never made sense to me. Oh, I love you, and then arrow in your eye. So I guess maybe that's a little warning. Um, so it seems to be necessary to look very closely, each one of us, rather than just follow some kind of a rule or protocol, to actually look, how does that happen? And because how that happens in your life might be quite different than the way it happens in other people's lives. I mean, speaking of two people embracing, when I was very young, and I'm not much on telling personal anecdotes, but this particular one comes up. I was never really hugged much as a little person, and I was the only one, kind of like Ruby, although Ruby gets lots of hugs, so yeah. Her mother hugs her constantly. So, but I didn't really miss it because I didn't have anything to contrast it with. But that became very important to me as I got older, and I find myself wanting very much to communicate with people by hugging them. And I've been doing it, and sometimes I scare people away by doing that. So, because they are threatened. And just to go through that a little bit more, there's contact or sparsha mudra. Sparsha mudra is the one you might see images of the Buddha where he's touching the ground. He's touching it. So it's a really strong teaching example. And this, as the story goes, he was challenged by the daughters of Mara, or when he was on the verge or actually attaining enlightenment. They came to him and said, it could have been somebody else, I don't know. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. They come and they say, how do you know you're attaining enlightenment? What's your proof? What's your, where's your credentials for being awake or for being the Buddha? And he said, this earth, this solid, sane earth is my witness. Touching sparsha mudra. So that's a really pretty exotic and highly sophisticated form of touching, and also a teaching form. So, but in the personal sense that Lynn is actually asking about, I think this is so personal that we, what this question that she's bringing up could lead us to is how does that function in our life? How do we work with that intimate kind of connection that we have, not only with our six sense fields, but with, our butt on the cushion or our face in a book or in the computer, or, there's contact. There's all kinds of, nowadays with the exotic electronic situation where we've got so many different ways of contacting people. And we're doing it, and there's people making a lot of money from doing that. But I think the thing I wanted to point out that quite often is missed, it's fairly simple, so perhaps you're not missing it at all. But it's just like, I was just talking to someone today about the pain and pleasure are not that far apart. They operate on a similar dynamic. It's like the example I use sometimes is if a fly crawls across your shin, you're going to feel that because those nerve endings are highly sensitive. They're made to sense any irregularity going on. And but that same sensitivity, if we go in and twist the nerve that goes up through the spine to the brain, you go and twist that, you're going to have the same kind of sensitivity magnified by maybe hundreds of thousands. It's so painful, and so that's an interesting way to look at it. That whatever emotion you're feeling, try to look at that whole dynamic. Try to get a bigger picture. If you're a strong meditator, if you're strengthening your awareness practice, then your ability to see more deeply, I don't say it's going to be pleasant, but to see more deeply in the way in which your six sense fields are operating, the six sense objects and the sense organ in all of those, and including the mind, including thoughts arising, just like sounds come, touch, thoughts arise in the mind. We don't really generate thoughts in the same way, in the way that we might think that we do. We have a thought arises and we add on to it. I like that. I don't like it. It's a good thought. It's a neutral thought. It doesn't concern me. Or I need to think that more. I need to think that less. Or why am I thinking that? I shouldn't be thinking that. We're always kind of having these little mini conferences with ourselves and kind of scolding ourselves on like a micro level all the time. If you begin to see that as a meditator, you begin to see that. And one of the things that meditators often discover is they're getting worse. No, not getting worse. You're actually seeing what's been happening all this time. You're starting to actually see the way in which you keep objecting to this and agreeing with this and shutting down on that. Passion, aggression, and ignorance. Shutting down, grasping, and rejecting. The way Lynn's question is arising is causes me, you could say, or I feel like I want to respond to her by saying, and it would be more personal if we were just, we Skype every now and then, so I talk to her every now and then. It would be more, I would want to interact with her more personally about that and see what, I would ask her more questions about what she's saying. So her question, I'm not quite sure. And of course it is personal, so I can't do a lot with that, but what I would say probably generally to anyone is be very careful. I mean, not paranoid, but be careful about moving into any area with your thought patterns just in order to solve the problem. Be careful about going in there and say, I've just got to get that. I got to figure that out. Figuring out doesn't work too well. Have you noticed that? You can't really figure things out. So, and with Lynn's question, could you read the last part of her question? What is personal contact is the main thing.
In the 3 sections to it, in the light of relative truth and the dependently risen, related to compassion and being genuine.
Yes.
If we are not separate, one with all things.
Yeah, I usually don't go so far as to say we're one with all things. I used to say we're not separate, and then I just let you hang out there, because that's your insight that needs to rise after that. To say we're one is too much like something the ego wants to say. Well, we're all one, so, just be happy, just be peaceful. When actually it takes a lot of, you could say, dedication, a lot of energy, and a lot of devotion, and a lot of sincerity to really accomplish this path, to actually awaken so that you can see what Lynn is using there. You can actually realize those deep in your heart, deep in your, or you could say your gut, deep within, to realize it so there's no doubts about it. You don't have a question about any of that. I'm not saying that you have this wonderful X-ray vision where you're looking, you can, where everything that appears is completely evident. What I am saying is you will know what you need to know, and you'll know what you don't need to know, and you'll mind your own business. That's what happens. We tend to think we just need to get into something further, and it's not really necessary. You can actually be right here. Everything my teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, everything is evident right here. Everything you need is right here. You don't need to go deep down into things. I would disagree a little bit there. I would have to have a discussion with him because I don't think he's incorrect. I think the way he was talking and the audience he was talking to were people who were trying to bore down into things and figure things out and had all kinds of concepts and so on. And this is somebody who was a tulku who was educated from the age of 4 or 5 to really understand. He was studying these 12 links in the chain of existence probably when he was 6 or 7 and had to memorize them, and was probably whacked with a stick when he didn't memorize them. This is medieval Tibet. They didn't have, what was this, family and children's services. So, yes, Sheldon.
So figuring things out seems to be like it might be part of my personality, and sometimes it's pretty satisfactory. And and helpful.
Okay.
So I don't understand how not doing that is helpful.
I think let me say it this way, figuring something out and saying that's helpful, it's a relative situation, and we can use relative solutions for relative problems, but usually and quite often, and probably sometimes even in your case, if I may say so, that the issue is deeper than just kind of a relative situation. I'm not saying it doesn't have relative qualities to it, and that fools us, because then we're fooled into thinking we should be able to fix this. But what is the assumption there? That there's something to fix. When you think there's something that's fixed, you start going in circles. It's called samsara. The Tibetan word is korlo, where you actually think that you're getting somewhere. It's called, I think in English, that's called a tilt-a-whirl. Don't eat before you get on one. Go ahead.
So is there an importance to discerning what to figure out and what not to figure out?
I think so. I think so. If you don't have to dig down into it, don't. Just look at it. What you're looking for, you're looking at. It's covered up, but it might be a pile of leaves, but what you're looking for is under those leaves. Look at the leaves. See what they are. See what's covering up. See what the lid on the jar actually is. See how that's covering up something you need to look at. Realization is not an experience. Experiences, there's one, comes. We all heard that. Where'd it go? It's gone. Experiences come and go. If you have an experience and you try to cling to that, it will leave. It's just the nature of samsara, or this time and space world. But realization, since it's already the case, you already are not separate from the Buddha. You already are awake. It's just covered up with hope and fear and confusion and passion and aggression and trying to be somebody. Trying to be some kind of somebody. More? So keep figuring. Or go figure. Go figure. So I don't think Lynn's able to ask questions, is she? Probably not. Can anybody? Yeah, Shoko.
How do we know we're looking at something?
Because you won't know what it is. Usually when we look at something and we don't know what it is, we look away. We look at something else. That's why this technique of sitting meditation, sitting down, looking at a wall, traps you into seeing what you need to see. You need to see the wall, or you need to see space. If you're looking out across the room, you look at the carpeting, or you just see what's in front of you. More?
Not yet.
Stephanie.
Is the idea of the decision always adding?
You know, it can be, and since it's not always so, it's not always the case, but it's enough so that it's confusing, because we think that all decisions are the same, and they are not. Usually, what happens in the decision-making process is we are confounded and scared by the fork in the road. I don't like those, because it's a fear of the unknown. So if you start operating out of hope and fear, you will make what's commonly called bad decisions. Although you could, because of causes and conditions, not necessarily, you might decide something, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I went to Notre Dame instead of, Penn State. And there's no way you can tell. There's no way you can't do either or. Either or doesn't work. All you have is or. And if you have two of them, you have a boat. You don't really need to go. You don't really need to. It's really pretty good news to know that you don't have to figure out anything ahead of time. There is no ahead of time. It's an illusion. The future is an illusion. Hear how I say that? Illusion. Illusion. It's not real. You can't find it. It never gets here. It's always now. And you could say, "Oh yeah, sure, it's ours now." But I mean, if you bring your awareness, bring the tentacles of your awareness back out of your thought process and your thinking, your hope and fear process, and just be here and just be this, just be this. Past and the future is beside the point. There's only this, and it's not even now. Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now. Come on, Eckhart. There's no power in now.
So where's the power?
There isn't any. Power is always about separation. Like if you say where, that's separation. There's nowhere else to look. More? Come on, this is fun.
Just more about adding.
Okay, adding. So I say don't add. And then what I'm talking about there is whatever arises, don't add anything to it. Don't add your opinions, your interpretations, your ideas. If you need to do something with that, it will happen spontaneously, just out of your basic insight. You will add before you can help. It's called first thought, best thought, which is what Trungpa Rinpoche, one of his little slogans. First thought, best thought. I'm not finished murdering her yet. Go ahead.
When you say first thought, best thought, it feels like more confusion.
Okay.
Maybe that's.
It's just a way to help, to encourage people that Trungpa Rinpoche used, to encourage people to just go with your gut kind of thing. Just don't spend much time evaluating, because you don't have all the information anyway. So you might as well just, if you need to do something, then just first thought, best thought, just go with that. And I say, go ahead.
Sorry. So one more question. So is
Certainly.
that, instead of calling it thought, is that intuition or gut? First thought, maybe it's
Yeah.
gut.
You could say that. Say that. And I often say, don't do anything unless you have to, because the reason I say that is because that means the idea is to encourage you to hold still. It's called, what is that called? Patience, right? Yeah. Hold still. And then you can see more clearly if you're not operating out of hope and fear or panic or anxiety, but you're just here. You're here. You're calm. You're relaxed. Much more clear about what's arising in the six sense fields, including the mind. If you're not anxious about, you're not looking at your watch, you're just here. You're just here. Then what needs to be seen will arise, and what needs to be added to will just happen spontaneously. It's like opening your umbrella when it rains. You don't have to think about it. You just do it. You don't have a lot of thought. The rain, the water's coming down. It's hitting me, getting wet. Should I do this? It seems like I should, but maybe that kind of thing. It's a silly example, but I think we all kind of recognize a little bit of that happening when you start to panic about stuff that is totally, beans.
That idea of first thought, best thought, seems like it might be good for experienced meditators, but I don't think I'm experienced enough to put that into practice.
Is that first thought?
Follow my first thought.
Was that your first thought?
Maybe it was.
Okay,
When I heard that, I initially rejected it.
Well, that's okay. Then that's your first thought. Then don't do it.
Yeah.
I trust you.
Thanks.
I trust you. Yeah. You're welcome. I trust you, and the reason I say that is only you know yourself. You're the one who's known yourself since you were born. So if anybody's going to have some real insight, and if you're sincere, you really are interested in having insight into who you are and how you operate. The only reason you need a teacher is to encourage you to find out who you are, not to tell you who you are. I wouldn't presume to take that away. But if you, the way I often talk about it is I teach with permission. If I have your permission, I'm probably going to tell you stuff. And if I don't have permission, we probably aren't going to have much to say to each other. Go ahead. Anything else? Okay. Shoka?
Can first thought, best thought seem like confusion?
Sure. Yeah, it's not, first thought, best thought isn't necessarily going to be some kind of a wonderful solution to everything. It's just, the only thing it's doing is trying to keep you in the your original insight before you start to protect yourself. You know, something arises and you think, oh, that works, that'll do that. Or so, and it does take a while. And there, you know, there is something to what Mark's saying about somebody who's experienced. There is something to that. Sitting meditation, doing a lot of sitting meditation, that's going to be a more workable approach than someone who doesn't practice at all and just maybe reads books about meditation. That's probably not going to work. Chazan?
How do you distinguish between the first insight and something that's compulsive?
So the first insight is would be, you know, fairly pristine. It wouldn't have a lot of justification around it. It wouldn't have a lot of tag-alongs. I mean, things that are kind of saying, well, this is right because, and this, and if you said, I'm going to do this, if it came out of that and you said, you know, I think I'm going to buy that kayak and move up to the Straits. You know, you said that, and if, you know, you would, and someone near you heard that say, well, what are you going to do that for? You would not know. You would not know, because it has a purity to it that goes way below the radar of ego. Ego is the one who knows stuff and makes excuses and blames and praises and tries to protect itself against anything that's wrong, or get things that are really praised, you know, like, look what I've done. And so if there's sensitivity around it, then it probably wasn't first thought. And it doesn't mean that if you moved up there, you know, you wouldn't have a hard time and have to move back. But you don't know, we don't know, just like what Lynn's asking at contact, you don't know what you have to touch and what you need to leave alone. If you think you do, then you're in for a circular life. And it's called the 12 links in the chain of existence, right through rebirth, sickness, aging, and death, right back to ignorance and formations and consciousness, and right on up to contact and so on. So, but in the big picture of things, you might need to meet someone there that you will just interact with for 3 weeks and leave, but something about that situation had to occur so you could go on. You know, I could sit and write books about this. You know, I mean, it's the stuff of the stories are made of. Drama, our lives are pretty amazing. Down through the centuries, you know, we don't leave much behind. Warren?
So, is it wrong to...
Wait a minute, wait, wrong. No, do wrong. Oh, you mean R-O-N-G? Without the W? I mean, it's Warren.
Oh, yeah. Wrong. Yeah. Is it wrong to be hopeful?
Wrong to be hopeful, wrong to be hopeful.
Trying to figure that out.
Yes and no. So the idea there, and I know what you're asking about. So the idea is to look and see what hope, a little bit of hope. Buddhism is the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. So a little bit, but people tend to overdo that and get all caught up in, you know, a lottery mentality. You know, like, I hope, you know, I hope we put so much energy in, and then we fear that it's going to go awry, and we fret about it, and then we go back to hoping. And then
Well, I guess optimistic then. Is it?
No, that's good. Yeah.
So, but how do you find the middle ground then?
By finding the extremes. You see the extremes, middle ground is obvious. Don't do anything unless you have to, and you'll find yourself right in the middle of everything. And the wonderful thing about being in the middle of everything is you're actually, in terms of contact, like Lynn is acting out, you're actually touching everyone. You're very intimate with everyone because you're not busy with your own confusion, your own, I like this, I don't like that. How am I going to get happy? You're not concerned with your own happiness. This path is not about being happy.
It sounds like a slippery slope, though. Like,
Let me think about that for a minute. Slippery slope. Yes.
it's easy to get back on that carousel.
It is. And I'm not taking happiness away. I'm just saying that when you prioritize your own happiness, you're kind of in for it, because it's hard to try to always have that happen because it's causes and conditions. But if you put other people's happiness and make that very important, then you don't do too bad. We talked about you and your child who's headed this way in April.
Mm-hmm.
April what?
5th.
Good. Is it a girl? Is it a girl?
It's a girl.
Yeah. Aries.
Aries?
I like Aries.
Oh, cool.
I like the other signs too. Don't get me wrong. Okay.
It's crazy how time flies.
It is. Yeah, that's a song, I think. Other questions, please, about contact or about anything for that matter, or to help Lynn get a better response from me. It's difficult. Yes, Sheldon.
A question earlier was, where's the power? And you said there is no power. A lot of people that come here, as well as learning this, they're also learning about a 12-step program.
Mhm.
And one of the steps in the 12-step program is that you learn a power greater. You can be restored to sanity by a power greater than yourself.
Mhm.
So that might be kind of confusing for people that are learning about that. So how do you get some clarity around those two ideas?
I wouldn't argue with them. I mean, and I would say if something helps you and is helping you deal with this crazy life that we all are been introduced to against our will, or without our agreement, then, if that helps you, then some people, 12-step program is very, very helpful to them. It depends on your own personal wiring. Some people are not ready to do this kind of practice. That's why we don't advertise it. We don't promote it. We don't sell it. I make no promises to anybody about anything. But if you sense this is something you need to do and you come to me, then I have received a vow that binds me to you, and teaching you, helping you with this. But you could fire me in next week, and then you'd go your own way. But 12-step program for some people is very helpful to just help them have less chaos in their life. They're not particularly going to awaken, to actually see through relative truth and see absolute, have a realization about that nothing is separate. There are no separate beings anywhere. If you see it, the work is done. There's nothing else to do unless there's people that want your help. And if there are, you do this. If all those people go away, you move to Florida and watch Netflix. And you wouldn't live up here where it's cold. So I would say, going back to your question, of course, people, whatever people need, if people are doing cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, moral inventory, transactional analysis, anything that is someone perceives as being helpful to them, then that's probably something they need to do. I trust everybody to do what they need to do. More? Less? Yes, Michael?
Isn't power just a relative term?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make any difference whether.
I mean, me saying there's no power isn't going to affect power at all. Power is going to be powerful. So, but it's just it's so relative that it's, who's got the power, it's like who's on first. Doesn't work. It's just a power, just like consciousness or awareness, it doesn't really belong to anyone. You can't find an ownership behind any of that. Yes.
Is our illusion is that we believe that we have a belief in this power, and that's the kind of belief that gets you in trouble?
It looks
I
like
have power.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
Lisa,
If we're not separate, isn't contact beside the point?
yeah, you can't contact something you're not separate from. So yeah, it's beside the point, but you have to realize it. It can't just be a concept, because then you'll keep looking for how it shows up. You keep looking for proof. But if you realize it, you don't look for proof. You don't need proof. Proof is relative. Proof is just a cheap way of gaining apparent control. You don't need proof. So, yes. Anyone else? You should ask questions about that because it's not all that clear. Yes, sir.
How do we see natural boundaries in relationship to contact?
I think the causes and conditions that arise in any given situation are so complicated. Tributary streams flow in the darkness, and it's just, you can't track all the causes and conditions that produce any given apparent singularity or object or identity. There's so many that create that situation, and it's true in that situation also. So the only thing you can really do from the point of view of talking to you, our situation, is to practice a lot, practice awareness, practice a lot. So that, yes. What I'm saying is I can't clarify that with more concepts. More concepts we're just going to go in circles. So someone else might ask that question. I might be more conceptual, but with you personally, you just need to sit a lot more. You know that. Now you can continue.
With my concepts?
Yes. Go ahead, more concepts.
With a discontinuous identity, do natural boundaries change with maybe?
I think if you begin to see that identity is discontinuous, that there's no solid self anywhere. There's a whole lot of stuff that looks like a self, and several different things can get together and say me, but it doesn't prove anything. Because the next thing you know, they're breaking apart and saying, like there's the confident me, and then there's the me that isn't so confident. We hear people say it all the time. Well, part of me wants to move to Missouri, and the other part of me just wants to stay right here in Houston. I mean, that's a just obvious choice, right? Houston. So we're always breaking. Our very language shows how split off we are and how we don't know. I want this. I don't want that. I like this. I don't like that. I used to be this way. Now I'm this way. It's showing up all the time. But introducing a lot of awareness to that without fighting with it, without trying to stick it together, without tying those things together, and without separating them further, or making a big deal out of anything, we begin to. That awareness begins to leak out into everything. A relative way of saying it. You just realize that everywhere you look, you see yourself. More? Michael.
What's a natural boundary?
It's a natural boundary. Your skull, natural. More? There's a whole lot there.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, you're talking about boundaries and.
But look at when we have the example. It's probably the ideal one. They say if you look at the dreams we have at night, there are boundaries in there that are they imaginary, or did you really jump out of an airplane without a parachute? Did that actually? In the dream, while it's happening in the dream, it's real, and those things are real. The example I quite often use, and I'll use it tonight because it was a really intense example for me, is I dreamt that a fly crawled into my mouth, and I bit down on it, and it was horribly sour. Really, I knew the fly had to get in, and then I opened my mouth and woke up, and there was no taste at all. It was a dream taste. But it was powerful, and it was because it wasn't involved necessarily in thoughts. but it was just that really intense consciousness that is so intimate, which is taste. That's such an intimate. You can't, if someone has never tasted a guava, you can't explain how a guava tastes to anyone. There's no way. We don't have any concepts for that. So if someone has realized the true nature of reality, I can say two things about it. And you'll never be able to say anything about it that ever feels like you're making any sense. And you'll have no doubts that you've realized it. If you have doubts about it, you have not realized it. That's why it's called the torch of certainty. It's certain. You're certain. Nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can walk in and say, you know, that realization you had? Yeah. You mean I didn't have it? You mean it wasn't real? It's that kind of a thing. It's like waking up, you realize nothing sleeps. It just looks like things sleep.
So are there no boundaries?
Is that a trick question?
Not really.
Yes and no. That's called non-duality. There are and there aren't. To try to find a reference point is lost cause.
So is it to look at it until you see whether it is or isn't?
What?
Or so it's duality.
Yeah.
And usually when you run into duality, it means to look at it some more.
Okay.
Just look at it.
Oh my. There's Bun Bun, the rabbit. So we have a few minutes. We have a few minutes left. Any other questions, especially from someone who hasn't asked a question? Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the whole dreaming aspect of, I'd say, what was that? Limitations or boundaries? So like when we're sleeping, our subconscious is still kind of like exploring, and then we wake, because sometimes, like you said, I can have tastes or smells,
yeah,
or feelings like of flying or swimming.
Yes.
I'm just kind of.
What's your question?
So, like our subconscious doesn't have boundaries, but our physical body does?
I think there's boundaries everywhere. There's a kind of boundary happening all the time, usually based on belief. We believe something and it affects us in this situation, but it really affects us in the dream world. What we see, we believe it's there. Like in this situation, if you believe your thoughts, then you're kind of a prisoner of your thoughts. But if you don't believe your thoughts, then it's much more fun. Essentially,
are there natural boundaries that are really subtle?
Yeah, there's a Trungpa Rinpoche talked about natural hierarchy. That there's the obvious one is the roots of a tree. You don't put the roots of a tree in the air; it won't work. They're in the ground, in the trunk, and the leaves, and it's a natural hierarchy, natural boundaries that are operating there. And this is happening with us as living beings with consciousness. So they're very subtle. Lots of layers of it. There's so many layers of it that you can't really count them. They're trying to do that. They're trying to do it. If you look at what was a book we just looked at recently, where they're looking down into a cell and finding a cell has all kinds of different little parts to it. There's a carburetor and there's a battery. There's all these little passageways and little validations and so on that make it a really complicated little tiny thing that we have millions of. And then there's a boundary between those and other cells. I'm not sure if I'm really responding appropriately to your question or not. You're talking about subtle.
I didn't have a specific
Yeah.
boundary in mind.
So you could just take your own emotions, notice the boundary between one emotion and another. Is there, or between one thought, say, look at a thought. Can we really see what a thought is? Can you bring awareness to a thought and see where a thought arises from, how it stays, and then it moves on or falls away, unless you grasp at it through accepting it, rejecting it, or ignoring it. And then it's going to hang around for a while. We don't even know what they are. It's common. You can go anywhere and say, what are you thinking? Somebody will say, I don't know. What are you thinking? Well, there isn't anything like, what do you mean by thoughts? Are there thoughts? No one is particularly perplexed by that. But yet, if you go into it and say, do you know what thoughts are? People's eyes start getting really big because they don't know what they are. We don't know what thoughts are. Why is one thought painful and another thought not painful? Or why is, what is that about? How does that really work? Not separate.
So when
Stephanie?
you're saying boundaries, are you saying boundaries are real and then you're also saying not separate? Doesn't
Yes.
not separate indicate?
Yeah, it's called not to. Boundaries and no boundaries, not to. Yes. It's not that clear. You should be able to ask another question, just out of the lack of clarity.
Are boundaries always protection or containment?
It kind of looks that way, and that's a real easy way to understand it. Protecting something from getting in or containing something from getting out. We don't want things to get out that we want to keep. We don't want things to get in that might contaminate us or affect us. So we're always, boundaries are, we're always looking. This is something that, not to get into politics particularly, but if you look at the world, they're just completely ignoring the natural boundaries of things. Monsanto is probably the big culprit. I hope I pronounced their name right. I want them suing me. But, when I say culprit, I'm not saying they're they're to blame for something, because I think they're, probably people in there are doing their best to look at situations, I assume, and also trying to make money and try to have power over everybody and control over the seeds and so on. But there's something about that that doesn't seem like it's being looked at very closely, and it's kind of a tampering with things based on self-centeredness that is disrespectful to the natural order or the natural hierarchy of things. Even there's some, maybe some of you have read or something, or something about even going into the land and plotting off land and then digging it all up and planting things and harvesting in order to produce more. Doesn't work quite so well when it comes to the really big picture. What really works is when you're hungry, go pick something. But that's called primitive. Interesting area to look at, about, especially when we bring our preconceptions about what that is. Just to look and say, look at a farmer and say, was that okay to mark off some land, call that private? It's just something to look at. Don't misunderstand. I'm not promoting anything other than, what am I promoting?
Marxism.
He said Marxism. Yeah, caught me there.
Back to nature.
Back to nature with Karl Marx.
I was talking about those Marx. I was talking about the glasses.
Oh, you're talking about Groucho Marx. Groucho, Harpo, and Chico? Yeah, I knew those guys. back in my generation. Any further questions? So yes, Mado.
Yeah, I'm still confused about the relationship between first thought, best thought,
Yes.
and a compulsive response.
Are you ready for my answer, or do you want to
Yes.
explain your question more?
No, I'm ready for your answer.
Yay, I like that. Very good. Okay, I think I'm ready to respond. All right. So, first thought, best thought is not impulsive or compulsive. It just flows out of the natural flow of things. This happens, that happens. You see something that's moving this way, and you have a thought. The first thought about it is to stop it, or the first thought about it is to let it go. First thought, best thought, or the first thought about it is just to not do anything. Or is to watch it further, or the first thought is to see where it came from, or the first thought is to see where it's going. First thought, first thought, first thought, first thought. You're totally there. You're no longer concerned with your own safety or how you look. But compulsive is based on passion, aggression. I want that. It's getting away. I got to grab it. Or it's going in the wrong direction. Or some kind of a panic or some kind of a control modality or impulsive. Based on the three poisons usually. If the three poisons are not operant, but are also not being shut down or ignored, then we see the natural flow of things. The natural hierarchy is there, and usually what we will do is allow things to move in the way they need to move. And then if you're completely present and you're not objecting to, agreeing with, which is the hardest one to see maybe, other than ignorance, or ignoring, then because of natural hierarchy, you as a living being will naturally find your own relationship with that situation. And coming back to Lynn's question, you will touch or not touch, but it won't come out of open fear. It'll come out of intimacy. You could say, at the risk of sounding idealistic, it would come out of love. It would come out of a deep concern for everything you see, because it's your own. Everything, everywhere you look, it's your own. This is your body. It's not just an exterior thing you're moving around through, trying to keep from having bad things happen. So, but that takes a while of practice to be able to work with the mini version of hope and fear, of passion, aggression, ignorance, which are the thought patterns. Don't kill your thoughts. Bodhisattva path, you receive bodhisattva vows. You're a monk. So don't kill your thoughts. Practice there rather than worry about, it's easy not to kill out in the world because there's laws and there's, we don't have guns. I don't think we do here. Anybody packing? So it's a little bit easier because the situation is more clear, and the society it's more clear from the point of separation. But when we sit down on the cushion, we tend to go to war with ourselves. We go to war with our thoughts. Please don't stop your thoughts. Don't start them. Don't join them. Don't object to them. Don't do anything with them, but just observe. Just see them, and by seeing them, then the ones that you've been shoving down will start to flutter up, and you'll start to see the things you've been holding down. It's a powerful exercise in getting reacquainted with yourself. Trungpa Rinpoche also called that making friends with yourself on a really deep level. No more war, no matter how difficult the emotions or feelings come up. Do not fight. Do not fight. In this way, by doing this, we learn how to really work with other people in the world who are beating themselves up or beating someone else up or having a great deal of doubt. Then we were able to we had the time, not only that time and the energy, but we had the insight to know not to meddle with that person if they need to experience certain things. It's not like you're a psychologist. You're a meditator. You're a student of the Buddha's Dharma. All things are dependently arisen. That's the realization. All things. There's not a separate being anywhere. It's available to everybody. You can see it. If you see it, warfare is over. More?
if you are living out of hope and fear or in bondage to the three poisons, your first thoughts, won't that first thought be an expression of that?
Could be.
So when you say that our practice helps us get in touch with that flow, that natural flow of things,
Yes.
isn't it then important that we become aware that we're operating out of hope or fear or in bondage to one of the three poisons in order to distinguish what the first best thought is, and not the compulsive thought, which is operating.
No wonder you got a degree in philosophy. I can't even follow you.
I give up.
Where's
the whoopee cushion?
Doesn't it kind of come back to Mark's question though? I mean, when
Mark's
Mark
question,
said
Mark?
he didn't feel that first thought was a good thing for him.
Yeah. So both you guys, it didn't work for you.
Okay.
You or Mark.
Because
Yeah.
my sense of acting compulsively for me is that I'm acting without awareness. That it isn't, that if I'm acting with awareness, then I'm not just kind of flowing with the whatever impulses are coming.
What's your question?
I don't have a question.
It's just a statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other statements? Yes.
Your concept of the earth being part of your body.
I didn't say that. I didn't say the earth was part of your body. I said the earth was your body.
The earth was your body. Excuse me.
Thank you. You're excused.
Earth was your body. I wonder if that would have any effect upon people putting borders in then, if everybody thought that way.
Well, sure it would, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but to get, we're doing the best we can on this particular planet at this time, and it's looks pretty difficult. So, but we don't have to worry about the rest of it. I mean, or we do, of course, we have to worry. But on the other hand, we could also just train our minds, awaken yourself. The best way to help the world is to realize who you are and realize what this world is. That's the best way to do it, the way it looks here. And that to a relative way, that may not be in time to save, to keep Mr. Trump from putting a wall down in Mexico. So, good question. No. I saw you doing this. So I thought, no. Well, one last question. Okay, we can dedicate to Marathon.
In the back of your chant books is the dedication of merit. I'd also like to call your attention to our donation boxes in the hallway and at the back of the Zendo. And online, you can donate online.
Rivers penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho San Shi Shi San Mu Sa Moko Sa SokukoJi the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
And we take money in the mail too. So good old USPS.